You're watching Captains of Industry here on CNBC Africa, and I'm chatting to Marcel von Aulock, who is the CEO of Tsogo. Thanks very much for joining us. So last week I chatted to Graham Stevens, obviously from Sun International, so we've got a pretty good sense of how he feels about the gaming, to some effect the leisure industry. You, of course, have 90 hotels in the portfolio, 14 casinos, and then obviously also the conferencing centres like the Sandton Convention Centre, etc., etc. So a huge portfolio. And just to remind our audience, you are spread in South Africa, Africa, and the Seychelles, as well as the Middle East. So this is not a small portfolio. What trends are you seeing right now, given, Marcel, that you released your results for the full year to the end of March on the 25th of May?
I think the important part is that the two businesses, gaming and hotels, are quite distinctly separate. There's a world of hotels that are around casinos and are part of that, but they actually operate as distinctly separate businesses. So even the casinos, the hotels that are at our casinos, only get about 10% of their business where it's pure casino floor related business. The rest of it is your normal corporates, leisure, airline business, government contracting, you name it. So the trends will be distinctly different. Gaming is obviously a very consumer focusing. It is the top LSM. Casino gaming in particular is high income, and so it's pretty resilient.
So do you see it being resilient? Because this is a much debated fact.
It is. Casino gaming is resilient in that you worry about whether you're growing quickly or slowly. It's not absolutely bulletproof. If the economy falls apart or if people are really, really miserable, they're not going to gamble. But at that top end, it's a relatively small amount of entertainment spend out of their budgets. So, I mean, to get the sort of top tier card in our loyalty program, you've got to have a theoretical spend of about 60,000 a year. Now, if you put that in context of like a golf club membership or cyclists, they blow
you
that
are talking
many,
about
many
a
more times.
LSM.
It's pretty defensive, unless you have major regulatory change or economic thing.
Talking about major regulatory change, you did mention in your results the furore around the visa regulations, and that you managed to grow, it was 12% despite the visa debacle.
So in that sort of world, that goes into hotels, which is a completely different business model. Hotels are notoriously volatile. You've got all the advantages of you don't have the same regulatory environment, the same regulatory risks, although things like visas and that come in, but it is a much more difficult business in fact, much more cyclical business, and you've got to get those cycles right. So you're continuously in either oversupply or undersupply, so it's feast or famine, whereas gaming has a more defensive nature. And if you go back to like what happened in Vegas in the world economic crisis, the ones that went bust had spent all the money on real estate development. The actual core gaming didn't have so much of a problem. It was people gearing up their balance sheets, too much debt, going into the housing market, and that's where it all went wrong. So in South Africa, we've had a pretty stable gaming market. It's been slow growth because it is in a tough economic environment. Hotels, you had a major crash after a build-up to and in the World Cup.
The Soccer World Cup.
And that's been recovering, but slowly. So
it's really a supply-demand issue.
It is.
And there was oversupply.
There was oversupply and strong demand pullback from corporates and government and so on in the ensuing years because everyone went into recession. And, you know, for financial directors, it's the first thing you cut is the travel budget. And we saw people weren't getting on the planes, they weren't staying in hotels, the hire car companies saw contraction. So the world pulled back dramatically, and that's been recovering nicely.
Where are we in that recovery?
So we're about halfway recovered. If I just take Tsogo as a group, and we've got probably 30% of the SA hotel market, so we're a good indication of where the things are. We went from a sort of average occupancy of 70 down to a low of 58. And we're now in the mid-60s. So you're about half back where you should be. Our long-term trend occupancy is 68, and we're not at that yet. So we think there's a bit of upside in hotels, but
aren't you
very driven
going to
by
find a whack
demand.
because of the South African economy? I mean, we contracted for the first quarter by 1.2%. Surely that is going to...
I think the worst of it is in it, to be quite honest.
Do you?
You know, a lot of that contraction is sitting in industries like mining and so on, of which we're not particularly reliant on. But South Africa's on like complete fire sale. I mean, our prices are
with the
ludicrous,
rand, where it is to the dollar and to the
if you
pound.
can't sell South Africa now, you really shouldn't be in sales.
Are you capitalizing on that?
So we're seeing a big uptick in that. I mean, Cape Town, I think, is having a strongest winter it's had in a while. Now, Cape Town winters are notoriously, you can shut the hotel down, put off the lights, everybody come back in summer. But the season, which was very good this last season, has carried get through. So we are seeing a strong international performance. It's not a big segment of our business because we are so local corporate travel focused, but it makes a big difference to us because the balance of town fills up. And there's a lot of hotels that rely purely on that. And if they are suffering, then everyone's scrambling for the same market at the end.
Let's talk about Nigeria. What are you seeing in that environment? Again, if I look at what Sun International is experiencing in Nigeria, it's a very difficult operating environment. Is that a similar trend within Tsogo?
Yes and no. We have a very different scenario to Sun International. So they've got internal politics with their partners, and they've got a real problem there that we don't have. Ours is a more economic crunch. I mean, we've been running the hotel for 10 years. We acquired it 3 years ago. Quite frankly, probably not the brightest thing we've ever done. We spent a lot of time on due diligence, land rights, etc., which is important stuff to get right in Nigeria.
You're based in Ikoyi, Lagos.
In Lagos. And what you didn't want was sort of finding out you're buying the hotel from someone who didn't own it. But what was challenging was like Ebola hit the market. It killed corporate travel dramatically. Just started recovering from that, and then you had the oil price crunch. So it's pulled back general spend in the market. We also have quite a high Naira exposure because we have a lot of local business. And you can't bang up the local Naira price by 50% simply because the Naira dollar's fallen out of bed. So we're probably doing half the profits we were doing there 2-3 years ago.
So it's had a serious impact, but you're still profitable.
But we're still profitable. And the hotel is a great located hotel. And when we sort of navel contemplate internally, because you do look back and say whether you spent this money wisely or not, it took us a long time to get into Lagos. I think if you gave me $20 million today and said go for it, it's 10 years before you open the doors to any building there.
So in hindsight, you would still make the same decision to have
probably could have bought it 2 years later, considering what happened in town, but I'm very glad we're in Lagos. And I think ultimately we will expand. Africa as a general market is something that the Tsogo Group's been in for 20 years. So we're not a newcomer to this. We've been through cycles in Lusaka. We've been through cycles in Tanzania. Our Mozambique operations have been very challenging and are now flying. Maputo. We've got another hotel coming up in Tet. So we're quite used to these markets, and our brand does well in Africa.
So what is your advice to those companies that are battling to find traction in Africa? Because let's be honest,
it's hard.
Each economy is very different to the next.
Yeah.
We know that old adage that you can't paint Africa with one brush.
Correct.
You're talking about 54 very different economies with their own rules and regulations. What is your advice?
Be realistic. So when people say, look, we're going to build 50 hotels in Africa in 5 years, ask them if they can name you 5 African cities. That's the first challenge. They are small markets. They are complicated markets. So you've got to be realistic in how you approach it, and you have to go very long term.
Which has been the easiest African country for you to operate in?
Mozambique. I like Mozambique. We have a great location. It's like without a doubt the best hotel in town by a long shot, and expanding that has really paid off. We're the only hotel that's on the seaside of the Avenue de Marginal. Zambia has been good. Mainly our entry cost was very low. We bought out of Anglo years ago, so it's been a difficult market, but the entry cost was much lower than new builds on others. And then Nigeria has been interesting. It's a hard place to do business. It's a hard place to visit.
But you can't really afford not to be there if you're consumer facing.
Yeah. And I quite enjoy the people and the environment. So it's a tough one, but I do see potential long term. Seychelles is Africa and not, but completely different. It's resort. It's not. All our other hotels are business hotels in Africa.
From an economic perspective, is that robust? You obviously destination for international.
Yeah,
visitors.
so we've made good money out of Seychelles over the years. You get excellent rates there. It's a much higher yielding market than Mauritius, for example. Much smaller market. Your danger in that is these small markets. You just need one new 300-room hotel, and the whole market supply and demand is out of balance. But again, I think they bought that hotel in the mid-80s or something. So you've got historical land cost. You're not in there with enormous investment money. You're just making sure your standards are good and you're keeping your profits going.
What model are you using with regards to your supply chain? Is there a central food and services distribution arm?
No, we do everything, both in South Africa and in Africa. It's a lot of local focus. There are certain things you buy in South Africa. You've got very key suppliers like Bidvest and so on that you deal with because they are around in your key city centres. As soon as you move out of town, that gets a bit harder. And it's a toss-up whether you outsource certain things like laundry, whether you outsource it to Boston or you keep it in-house. But by and large, your food purchasing and so on, your generic stuff is localized, and then you're very localized for your specialized sort of things. Years ago, we had a thing called Sun Cuisine, which was this whole concept of sous vide manufacture in a factory in Midrand, and then you bring your production costs down,
and then you distribute
it
to all of your
to all the
operations.
hotels. And the theory was you take all the skills out of the hotels because you've got a central consistent delivery. Like, absolute bombed. It never worked.
What was the failure point?
Because what you ended up with was quality quite like you get in the sort of mid-market hotels in America and Europe, which is terrible. And all of us travel internationally. I can't believe I'm paying for this. This is like
so
rubbish.
The quantity actually brings down the quality.
Absolutely. And what we've done, particularly in the last 5 years, we've really focused on is putting in food and beverage, for example, the skills back in. So we've got essentially released the chefs to do what they do best. And you've seen an uptick in the quality of food and beverage, quality of banqueting, and quite frankly the profitability of it too, because people have responded to that. If I think of the sort of really great drinking, eating halls of Joburg, I'd say the Sand Deck at Santon Sun, the Palazzo at Monte Cassino, and 54 in Bath Level 4 have got a rate amongst the top. 10 years ago we wouldn't have had anything at the top in town.
Is it a concern for you that the industry thought that the casino licenses were capped at 40, and now it appears that Trade and Industry may release another license and bring that to 41? Does that go back to economics and completely disrupt supply demand?
No. So we don't like it, because we think it's totally unjustified. It's clearly a political issue between the Northwest Province and DTI, and for some reason they've gotten into the DTI's head on this thing. The Northwest Province is over-casinoed anyway, because it used to have all the homeland casinos before the new dispensation came in. I can't imagine where they're going to put another license in Northwest, because they've got Sun City. Their argument was they lost Marula on the provincial changes, and therefore they deserve a new one. But Marula is uneconomical and shutting down anyway. That's why Sun International is trying to move it into Pretoria. So the whole argument seems like a nonsense to me. Our objection to it is really philosophical, saying if 40 became 80, that would disrupt us. And at what point are you opening a door?
And at what point, if you can change the cap,
Correct.
Where do you stop? It's a principle.
Correct. It's a principle argument. We don't really care what happens in Northwest, but what happens if Gauteng has 7 and suddenly becomes 22? Then we have a big problem. Our discussions with DTI has been that it's absolutely the exception, and they're only doing it because Marula's put forward this, or because Northwest put forward this case that they lost the license due to provincial demarcation. I still don't like that. I mean, at some point, what if South Africa goes back?
Will industry stand together? Lock this out?
CASA is the body that we take those type of decisions with, so we discuss it there, and CASA will go and legally object to it. In the end, government can pass regulations on anything they do. So in a casino world, changes in licenses, changes in taxes, changes in regulations that affect your operating ability are your risks. Your upside of all that regulation, that's also all your barriers to entry. So the same regulator that threatens you gives you your monopoly.
Talk to me a bit about your shareholder register. Where are your shareholders located?
So HCI is obviously our controlling shareholder. They own 48% of our stock, and they're like the anchor. And then our shareholder register changed a lot when we did the SAB exit. Principally SA institutions. We have about 12% international shareholding, which is bigger than I thought it would be.
It is bigger than I thought it would be as well.
5% of that's out of China. And the balance is a mixture of European and American institutions. And then your local institutions are big in our holding. The stability of gaming does make it very attractive to institutions.
That 5% out of China is interesting. How do you service those shareholders?
Look, it's an interesting crowd. That's H&A. They are a very aggressive acquirer of hotel, tourism, travel industries around the world. They've bought up everything from Swissport to they just bought out Carlson Residor in the US. They have the largest non-government airline in China, and when large, it's like 500 wide-body aircraft. So they're big players internationally. They bought in during the SAB process. They were quite key buyer in that. And
do you need to go and visit them?
I went to visit them to see who they were, because we didn't know who they were. You wanted
to see. Look at 5% of your shareholder register.
Yeah, but you hear about China is always like, this is big and that's big. So I wanted to see aeroplanes with H&A tails on them. I wanted to see buildings with H, and we saw that. So they're of substance and they're there. They also own, as an example, the two biggest outbound travel agencies in Hong Kong and in Beijing. Now, ignoring the visa regulations, to get into those travel agencies as a South African hotel group is normally sweat, blood and tears. Like now we've got an in, we can go sit with them and say, can we put together packaging? And the outbound tourism from China is enormous. So they've got 100 million people coming out the country. We only have to capture half of 1%, and you've added fundamentally to South Africa's tourism.
Give me a little more color around your revenue mix. So you look at the 14 casinos versus the 90 hotels, and you talk a lot about the stability of that gaming industry, which is what is attracting shareholders.
So out of our revenue, 65% is pure slots and tables. So it is big. It's a smaller number of units, but the numbers are big. And we've got, I'd say, the best casinos in the country, the big urban Monte Casino, Suncoast, Silver Star, Gold Reef City. So there's scale there. That's 65% of our revenue. 20% is room revenue in the hotels. 10% is food and beverage, which is across hotels and casinos. And there's about 5% other, which is a lot of tenanting revenue, because we resell rentals, parking.
So don't underestimate the units versus the contribution to revenue.
Correct. So casinos are enormous. And in fact, it's been one of the things that we're in the process of taking over the hospitality fund, which is going to become a REIT that we ultimately want to put all our hotel properties into, because one of the things I do believe is that people lose track of how big our hotel business is simply because it's dwarfed by the gaming business.
It sounds very much as though you could look to split the business.
No, so we split out the profits would go into the REIT, and that give you access to direct hotel profits, but the central management of the stuff we want to keep together. There's the synergy. So
the REIT, you would still have a body like the PIC able to invest.
That REIT stays listed, so it works very well for any form of pension fund investment, because it's pre-tax money that it gets paid out there. So it's attractive to them, policy holders, that sort of thing. But we want to keep the management functions all centralized. Your synergies between gaming and hotels are not a lot, because they are separate businesses. The synergies come in the back office, the development expertise, the HR, the marketing, the finance, and that we want to keep in one pot.
Talk to me about your own journey, and let's just backtrack to the position of FD, which you assumed in 2009 to 2011. 2011, you took on the position of a CEO. You are very young, as CEOs go, so I can imagine that if this is your passion, you don't see yourself going anywhere anytime soon.
No, I mean, look, it's the only company I've ever worked for. I was very lucky. I joined the company as gaming was getting going, and as Soho, the sort of group was starting to be formed, because you had in those days, you had a big hotel business wholly owned by SAB, which formed this joint venture to start gaming, and that just got going. And I was then involved, I think I was the first external employee to the group function. There was Ron Stringfellow and Martin Wilshire were the CEO and the FD, and then there was Dog's Body, me in the middle, who had to do a bit of the admin. And we worked a lot, almost immediately, on restructuring the group. And eventually we did a deal that swapped the gaming and hotels all into one business and formed Soho owning these two divisions. And that was a 51-49 between the empowerment partners and SAB. And that was the first time SAB went below control. And then that sort of ticked along, and then we kind of got into the industry consolidation mode, which took us 5 years to get hold of Gold Reef. It was like a long fight, but resulted in a reverse listing into Gold Reef that then brought us into the listed world again.
There are people out there who look at you and say, sure, you shot to the top in a very short space of time. Would you say it's right time, right place? Some of it had to do with luck?
Yeah, it has to be. I mean, if I'd joined 2 years earlier, 2 years later, my career would have been very different. There's definitely a luck that you in a place that just booms. You can be as brilliant as you want, but if you are left to run the CD factory when they've invented iTunes, life's going to be hard.
I think that puts the right context around our conversation. How would you define your leadership style?
Look, we've got very good people and very competent people in Soho. We actually have a very lean structure considering the size of the business and how many units we've got and so on. And I'm a firm believer that like idle work, devil's hands and all that sort of thing. So So everybody's pretty busy, but we're quite small teams.
You don't have a lot of churn?
Very little.
What is it that is essential to keeping people?
So they need to be adequately rewarded financially. That's like a given, otherwise you're going to lose people. And they need to have a purpose and something to do. And if everyone's busy and is focused on what this business is doing, and the business is moving forward nicely, so you realize it's not the CD factory and there's a big threat out there, then people are happy. I'd say just the last 5 years, we've probably spent 14 billion on acquisitions and new builds, and so there's always something going on in the middle.
You say that they need to be compensated adequately. Do you incentivize on performance? Linked to share price?
Yeah, we've got all that. We got a lot of stuff out of SAB back in the day. So you got your base salary for coming to work, you get your STI, your short-term bonus because the company had a good year and you had a good year, and you get a phantom share scheme that rewards on the share price growth over time, and that's the wealth creator over longer periods of time. And we've pushed that quite deep.
So the SAB structures were well thought out?
Yeah, the control structures, the remuneration structures, the whole way of running a business is very SAB orientated. I mean, most of the people either came from SAB, or all of us were trained by people who came from SAB. The central core team is quite small, but then your divisions are very big. Because you are, I think we're 40% of the casino market in South Africa, 30% as we said of the hotel market. There are very few people in this industry that haven't worked for us. And they're quite interesting businesses. I mean, hotels, I think our average age of employees, certainly from our medical aid, I remember being on the medical aid thing at the time, was like 28. So it's a young industry. It's an employer of young people.
You've actually taken the next question right out of my mouth, because I'm going to say to you, are you a young team?
Yeah. So and differentiate between head office, because that'll be an older structure than what's in the operating divisions. But it is a young industry, and it's a very mobile industry. So it's not unusual for people to work for us, leave and come back.
And then come back.
Either locally or internationally. And if I walk into hotels, whether they be Protea or City Lodge or Radisson's, I'm pretty much going to meet somebody I know before. I remember you used to work for us at Cullinan, or etc. So we find what we are a very big producer of skills for the industry. It's a bit irritating sometimes because you run all these training programs, and as soon as a superstar comes out, whoops, they go.
They get taken
but they
away.
come back.
But they come back, as you say.
And it is an industry like that. You can't have this view of, if you go work for somebody else, you're never going to come back here again. Because that is how people build their careers. There'll be rooms division here, and there'll be deputy general manager at another group, and general manager back with us.
So they'll go and get more experience elsewhere, and then come back to you.
And internationally,
at the end of the day,
international travel is like one of the great opportunities of the hotel business, and you've got to let people go and experience that.
What do you want for the next 10 years?
I'd really like to see the benefits of what we've done to this business over the last few years come through. I don't think we are recognised by the market enough for quite the scale and the asset base that we've developed in here. We've got, of our hotels, we own nearly everything, which gives you a solid underpin to that
property
business.
Property
underpin and a security of tenure. The management contract business is exciting. People talk about 500 hotels, but you lose 450, and that's a good year. So we've really built up this hotel business substantially. We've got a couple of deals we've got to finish, like the hospitality deal and the balance of the Liberty portfolio. We have, in gaming, we've been doing a lot of expansion. Our properties are absolutely best in class. If you just walk around Monte Casino, it is beautiful. The quality of everything from the gardens to the refurb interior is magnificent. We finished Gold Reef, we finished Silver Star. We have Suncoast to go, which is a big spend. It's 2 billion rand, and we've got to make sure we don't goof that.
If your refurbishment cycle for the majority of your properties is over and only Suncoast is still outstanding, that's a big element of your capex out of the way that doesn't need to be revisited anytime soon.
Yeah, I mean, the portfolio is in a better condition than it's been in years. Including in hotels, we've dealt with legacy hotels. Buildings that are 40 years old, where we've stripped it down, core infrastructure, plumbing, plant, air conditioning, the workspace. So the business is in really good condition. Now, I'd say our operators are about as efficient as you get, so I'm pretty comfortable they're producing what they should out of that. We've done some work on our website and our mobile booking platforms and our revenue management in hotels that I think has yet to yield results.
So you're embracing technology and
a lot
the
of
digital
that's come in,
age?
absolutely. 60% of our business is direct to the hotel, so we need to protect that. But ultimately, you need the economy to pick up.
Is this coming to the point that the share price isn't where you want it to be? Talk to me about your share price.
I don't think our share price reflects
25,
that value.
26, 27 rand at the moment.
Yeah, so depending where that is on that. We've been as low in December, I think we reached 20 rand, so it was like a PE of 10. We're probably sitting on a PE of 13 or something like that. But when we listed originally, it was a 19 PE. And in those 5 years we've been listed, since the reverse into Gold Reef, we've doubled earnings and doubled the dividend.
So now
And
your
the
share
price is kind of the
needs to
same.
play a catch-up.
I think it needs to play catch up. It's reflective of the fear people have of the gaming industry. The things that you raise, will the licensing regime change? Will the taxes change? And
What's going to
and
happen
the
in
narrative,
the rising interest rate
correct,
cycle?
and the narrative that gaming's not defensive because look what happened at the economic crunch. But missing the fact that was actually the real estate speculation that went crunch. Gambling is the defensive industry. I think we're a little bit affected by the big changes that have happened at Sun International. That was always seen as the big business in the sector, and it's been through a very tough time. I mean, Graham's had an extremely difficult job in
Having
turning
chatted
around
to
a
him
behemoth.
last week, I mean, by his own admission, it has been a very tough journey.
And they have we are different companies. People put us next to each other as comparison because it's easy because you're in the similar industry, but they are different assets. We don't have a Sun City. And Sun City is a very, very hard asset to make work, but you'll always be compared to those. I think the scale of this business is such that there are just absolutely enormous cash flows coming out. And the trick is going to be to invest those intelligently or return the cash to shareholders. Whenever we do a 5-year
shareholders love
plan,
to get their cash back.
and we're happy to be a dividend payer. Every 5-year plan we do is like very busy for the next 2 years and then de-gear rapidly and up the dividend. We always find something to do in between because it is an industry with incremental growth opportunities. But the trick is not to destroy value when you do this.
Well, Marcel, thank you very much for your time. I've been chatting to Marcel von Aulock, the CEO of Tsogo. You've been watching Captains of Industry here on CNBC Africa.